look, I'm not saying Arsenal should sign Darwin Núñez. I'm just saying Arsenal might have already signed Darwin Núñez. This is the Arsenal Vision Post-Match Podcast. My name's Elliot Smith. You can block me on Twitter, Yankee Gunner. Think about this for a second. Did we sign Ollie Watkins? Did we sign Darwin Núñez? Maybe the new transfer spend is subterfuge. You sign the player, but nobody knows. And then they go on to do devastating things to your rivals that help you win a title, because you really only sign players to try to win a title, right? So Ollie Watkins scores a goal against Liverpool. Darwin Núñez misses a sitter, doesn't get onto an easy open goal that he lets Emi Martinez get to. Liverpool drop points. And as a result, maybe those two strategic subterfuge signings, we'll call them, have resulted in exactly the outcome we need. Should we sign Benjamin Sesko or Hugo Ekitike? It's hard to say. Should we sign Svera Nipan? Should we sign, I don't know, Zubamendi, or maybe there's a different midfielder out there? How about Adam Wharton? I don't know. There's so many players, but you know who does know? Our director of football. And you know who our director of football is? This might surprise you. Phil Costa. That's right. We've started our director of football series over on the Patreon, where there's a set amount you have to sell and a set amount you have to spend, and you've got to decide how you're going to do it. And what you're going to find is that being the director of football at Arsenal, not as easy as you, okay, you know what? It's actually pretty easy. It's a cush job. Let's be honest. Everybody has FB Ref and Y Scout. Come on. No, but that pod is up. We'll do one with Scott. We'll do one with Clive. I will say that Tim and Paul have been more reluctant to engage in this exercise. They see it as beneath them, but I'm going to try to get them into it as well. We had a one club pod on the Arsenal women on Monday with Clive and Tim. I'm not even on it, so that's one you definitely want to check out. And Friday, that would be tomorrow, if you're listening to this the day it was recorded, we have the what's it called? Power Rankings. That's right, Power Rankings, where we talk about the big clubs and how we think they rank. And it's mostly a chance to laugh at them because they all stink. Let's never forget or stop taking time to appreciate that whatever we do this season in the Champions League and the league, Chelsea stinks, Spurs stink, United stink. They all stink, and we don't stink. And that is the kind of natural order that I like to see. So we'd love to have you over there. And if you use code AVP, it's $2.50 for the first month, which I think, is a really good way to have a pod every single day of the week, for goodness sake, so that when you're walking the dog or trying to fall asleep, you can listen to us. Probably when you're trying to fall asleep, I feel like Clive is more the ASMR. I'm more of the, oh God, I got to get up and go to work. But, we each play our role in this audio format. I do want to make one quick mention. The Arsenal accounts came out. We might mention the finances. There's one little line item in there thanking the Arsenal Vision community for the money that was raised, and pointing to that as part of the passion of the supporters and the motivation of the supporters to help out with global causes. We will be doing that again in April, but never a bad time to thank you for being a part of that. We have a big update from the Zaatari refugee camp. We'll be raising money for it again. And now there's a really, really bright future for some of those children if they're able to survive and sustain for another few years in that refugee camp. So there will be an update on that. But anyway, just seeing that in the official accounts was really nice, because I think for you all to be recognized for what you did is pretty special. And I do want to thank Topside Righty in the Discord who actually pointed me to that. I hadn't noticed it myself. So shows how carefully we scour the financial reports here. Hey, you know what? There's people for that. There's experts for that. Okay, 3 minutes and 20 seconds, longer than usual waffle, and certainly more than you wanted. But here with me now to discuss whether Liverpool have or are in the process of bottling the title, Manchester City's humiliation, our Champions League opponents, and maybe a bit on finances and transfers is Paul. You can find him on Twitter at PauseMyPants. Pause.
Woohoo!
And Tim. Hey, Tim.
Hello there.
I've gone completely chaos mode in terms of knowing whether I'm going to do social media handles or no social media handles. So the consistency is similar to, let's say, I don't know, like who's Gabriel Jesus is finishing, you might say. It's sort of in that bucket. All right, Tim, I'm going to start with you because you've been one who's been pretty clear that you feel it's gone, the title, and I have tended to agree with you, even if I am still impressed with what we are doing under the circumstances. I don't know if you bought the new Arsenal range of clothing that came out, the new hospital gown range that they released, though. It's nice, particularly breezy in the back. But I'm curious if you got a little flutter from that Liverpool-Villa game, what your thoughts are on that, and whether keeping the pressure on Liverpool might just turn them to dust. What do you think?
Yeah, I think there are signs. It's maybe overstating it to say cracks are showing, but little things like, did Van Dijk have a little Freudian slip and say Arsenal instead of Aston Villa?
Do you want to tell people what that's about in case they haven't heard?
Yeah, so he was interviewed on the pitch immediately after the game, and he meant to say credit to Aston Villa, but he kind of said credit to Arsenal at Aston Villa. Mm-hmm. So rent free, we're in there. And I still don't know how, like, I'm not going to lie, I watched the game. So, I mean, I watched it. So I was obviously involved enough to want to watch it. But I didn't have the nerves. So I still don't think I'm totally emotionally there. But when Donyell Marlon flashed that shot past the post in the last minute, I did the old throw the hands up and the, oh no, type thing. So, well, there you go. There's my daughter in the background doing a very, very passable impression of that. She's just come in. So yeah, I was obviously involved enough to do that, but I just think I want to make Liverpool go and win it. That's what I want. I just want there to, if they are going to crumble, the last thing I want is for them to crumble and for us to not take advantage and to leave the season with that type of regret. I want, like, if they go and win it, if they go and take all the points they should take and they don't have dodgy results and all that, fair enough, like absolutely fair enough. I don't even mind losing to Liverpool that much. I can compartmentalise it as a club who've done great things and probably deserve more league titles for the last few years than they should have had. But like, stay in the room. Let's get over the line in some of these games coming up. Let's get healthier. And I tell you what, a target in my mind, let's make that Anfield game meaningful.
Yep.
Even if it's we have to win. I'd take that right now. If you said to me right now, we go to Anfield, we win, it's in our hands, I'd take that.
And look, not to splash cold water on this, but head to head, a fully fit, loaded Liverpool with the best player in the world potentially right now in Salah, although Mbappe rising to the challenge day by day, it appears. Fully fit Van Dijk, fully fit Trent Alexander-Arnold. That midfield mostly looks fit, and Gravenberch, McAllister, and Szoboszlai. And, they did create 3.25 XG against Villa. Like, if you compare that and you say, let's say there was no gap, we're level on points with them, and we're trying to get it done with a teenager on the right, Leo Trossard and Sterling potentially on the left, and a midfielder at 9, you'd say it might be a mountain too high to climb, especially given that we have to go to Anfield and they get to defend their home turf. But football's weird, and we know this. The psychology of being chased is different than the psychology of chasing, and psychology comes in this, Tim.
I was going to come in and advance warning. I've been on the Arsecast this week, and I'm trying to make different points. But this
just don't make contradictory points, because that would get quite confusing.
But this is a point I made on there in terms of psychologically. I'm actually enjoying it a bit more now because we're definitely the chasers, and even the stupidest, most mean-spirited, one-eyed pundits cannot deny that the odds are stacked against us.
Yes.
We're playing Mikel Merino up front. And in a weird way, after like a quite a heavy season, I'm kind of enjoying that because I feel like the pressure is not on us at all. This almost puts more pressure on Liverpool. It's like, what you're going to do? Like, look at who we're having to turn out. Look at who's in hospital gowns at the moment. Like, it's all on you. And actually, I guess if I haven't let go, I have fallen into that. We're the outsider here, and no one can deny that. And I guess that feels like a bit more of a fun disposition than it has been this season.
Yeah, and I heard a lot of people complaining that the broadcaster in the UK, at least, was giving Liverpool a lot of credit for a good point, a reasonable draw, and saying, they were at pains to say it's a good point instead of pointing out that they've given up more ground in the title race. I do think if it was City chasing them down, there'd be this sense of like, you can't afford to drop a point because they're going to win every game. They're going to take all the remaining points the rest of the season. Any point you drop means you're getting chased down by the T1000 Terminator. And we know that because we had that feeling last season. I think pundits looking at us have less faith in us, which, okay, fair enough, but also looking at us in a depleted situation, and they acknowledge that Liverpool really just kind of need to keep the wheels from coming off. And so I think there's fairness to that. But again, they go to City this weekend. They have Newcastle after that. They still have a difficult cluster of games around our game at Anfield. They're 50-50 to get drawn with PSG in the next round of the Champions League. And candidly, I'll be rooting for them to get through that because I think every extra Champions League round is more. They still have to play a Wembley final. And those weird, I feel like the League Cup final is this weird thing because it's a culminating moment, but it's in the middle of the season. Then you got to turn around and go play league games again. So they clearly have the points advantage. I can do math. And they clearly have the player advantage right now. but psychologically they have to show that they can hold on. And we all remember, we do not let this slip. Narrator voice, they let this slip. So, Paul, are you able to enjoy the cracks showing, the potential that they might come back to us a bit without investing too much hope in it? Or are you fully invested? The emotions are all bound up in it again?
I guess I never really counted us out, and maybe for the same reasons, I won't get too far over my ski tips on being in. Mikel Arteta talks to the media and says, one game at a time. I'm certain that that's his philosophy within the team. That's his mentality for working his way through these things. And it's a mentality I've embraced myself, no matter how bad or maybe how promising it starts to look at. Nothing means anything if you don't win your next game. Like if we fluff it at the weekend, it's like, oh God, it's all off. We're screwed again. If just after that Liverpool screw up, oh, it's back on again. So it really is. The only way to do it is one game at a time. In the last couple of seasons where we're like, could this be it? Nothing means anything till you win your next game. And it's always been the case. If you went back, a month, 2 months ago, no matter what situation we were in, it was always a question of, if we win our next bunches of games, it's an easy answer. Yes, we're in it. And if we don't, we don't. So here we are. It's a bit like the Titanic, Elliot. I don't know if I've ever made this analogy before. Now,
Probably,
I know,
but why not fire away again?
Now, I know the ship sank, so put that out of your mind for one moment. But as we all know, the secret to the Titanic's unsinkability was it was compartmentalized. As long as the first 6 compartments don't flood. And that's us. We are the Titanic, Elliot. We are compartmentalized, one game at a time. So that's basically where I'm at. Yes, I'm enjoying it. I'm more leaning into where am I? Like we've run out of players up front. So what am I doing? I'm enjoying the thoughts of Ethan Nwaneri showing his world-classedness. Players surprising us. Will there be a Mikel Merino moment again? Will somebody else step up? Will Arteta switch the formation? So I'm finding it interesting as opposed to just worrying about the dearth of players up front.
The Titanic worked out all right, didn't it, if I remember correctly?
Yeah, the compartments worked as expected, and it was able to stay afloat and get to its destination safely.
I mean, it would have been fine. Okay, a lot of people would have died, but if the large girl had moved over a little bit on the plank, Leo was out of there. So, I mean, it was so close.
We've got Southampton away on the last day as well. So,
yeah, I mean,
yeah, true.
Was that the port that it left from? You're getting me to have to know things I don't know. Look, I'll ask ChatGPT about it later. Well, look, I think there is some truth to that, but I guess what we could do. Well, let's just quickly stay on that point then, Tim, because if we are going to stay in this, and I think, look, we are in it until we are not in it. Until mathematically they have won the title, we are in it, and we are the only team in it. And I think, look, no one wants to break their arm patting themselves on the back for finishing second. I get that, right? But in the context of circumstance, you have to say what a good season is, right? I think Forest and Bournemouth fans would be saying they're having a good season right now. Now, Arsenal are not Forest or Bournemouth, but that's not my point. My point is, we've seen other teams facing injury crises, and look at what's happening to them. City are getting routinely annihilated. United and Spurs are closer to relegation than Europa League. Okay, we are in second, still in a title race. And while one of the arguments I think people might make as well, one of the reasons we look so threadbare is we didn't adequately restock in the areas where we needed to. Again, and you get in a broken record territory a little bit here, but when you lose 4 attacking players to injury at the same time, I struggle to think of a team that's going to overcome that effectively. But it is really this simple, Tim, and we haven't had the chance to discuss it, so I want to get your view on it. Clive was emphatic. It's got to be Mikel Merino at 9. He basically said, if that's not what happens against West Ham, there's going to be a lot of angry people. I have a weird feeling he's going to go back to Sterling, Leo, and Ethan. So what about you?
So, I've given this a lot of thought this week. I think he will, but I think he might play Merino as well. Or Merino. Yeah. Sorry, I'm getting really, because like
Mourinho? Is that
Mourinho, yeah, is so
Clive
in
calls him Mourinho. I feel like there's a conspiracy to get Paul off the hook for Calafiorni or California
but
or
it's
California.
but it's obviously because Mourinho is such a part of the English football. And it's same with Nwaneri, right? Ranieri, and you end up saying Nwaneri. Anyway,
I don't.
So I think he might. I think there's a world in which he could do both and just play Merino in the advanced midfield role and say, get in there and support, get past Trossard, and let's have you doing what you did against Leicester, but just doing it. Because the goals he scores against Leicester, if you'd showed me those in August, I wouldn't have gone, oh, he must have been playing up front. Do you know what I mean? Like, they're both like perfectly cromulent midfielder type goals.
Yeah.
So there is a world in which he does that. And I understand some of the pushback might be, well, then what do you do from the bench? Well, you can still just put Merino up front and bring someone else on. Because I'm kind of with you. I still think he will go with that front three and he'll give it at least another hour. Because, look, if one of the learnings of the Leicester game was that Merino can play up front, one of the learnings surely is, well, actually, we can leave it till the 60th minute. Like, if it's 0-0 after 60 minutes, we can still go there. Because I think there are other considerations as well. Like, if Sterling doesn't start, I think that's it. We've lost that like, we've totally lost that player. And I get the version of that player we have is not, it's arguably not really worth very much. But at the same time, like, I kind of think that's it. Like, he almost can't start again. And so I do think there's something to give it another 60 minutes and, maybe we'll score a goal and it will be okay. And then we can get back into it. But I don't think he'll play Merino number 9 from the start. But I think he might put him on in that advanced midfield role. The other context to this is West Ham play with 3 centre-halves under Graham Potter. So they're going to have 5 at the back. But 2 of their centre-halves are fullbacks. So they play Kufau and Cresswell on like the outside. And I think they put Mavropanos in the middle. So that's not a lot of height on the back post. They've got 2 like fullback guys on the back post. And I wonder if that will figure.
Interesting point. What do you think about that, Paul?
I'm with Tim. I think that's probably a good shout as to what happens. I think to some degree he does Mikel Merino a favour by not putting him on from the start. Because I don't think Merino has proven yet that he's a reliable all-round 90 minutes striker. What he's proven is if the opposition isn't expecting the move, and okay, they're going to be half expecting it if he comes on as a sub, but they won't be adjusted to it. They'll be in patterns, they'll be in mode. Hopefully we'll have got them beaten into a pattern and then we change the pattern. And that's what worked for him. He was, they never really marked him. They didn't mark him. They didn't know to mark him. If you think of both goals, like the first goal, he's free for the header. It's a great header. He's found a little space. He has that craft in the box to get himself free. And the speed at which Nwaneri puts the cross in, Nwaneri doesn't blink. It's almost a no-lift cross. But they haven't quite found him, and he buries it. And the second one, they're not even tracking him. They're not like, oh my God, where's Mikel Merino coming? They're not looking over their shoulders like it's Haaland or whoever. They don't know he's going to get up on the right-hand side. He's going to get into the 6-yard box and get on the end of that and bury it. But you put him on as your striker on minute 1. He's got a whole other, to cut 3 centre-backs, as Tim points out. That's a lot of guys to work out where's Mikel Merino and to snuff it out. So I think you do him a little bit of a favour at this point to bring him on as the option they haven't prepared for. And I'm with Tim. We've a long way to go still to bury Sterling at this point when you may, who knows what's going to happen next week, right? Who might have a niggle for a game or so, and suddenly you're down to, you have one less attacker, and you need to go back to Raheem, who you've basically, you've said to him, you don't even get into a side when we've no attackers. We're going to play everybody but you. And the next week it's, Raheem, we really need a performance from you. I don't think I can see the reasons why he would persist at least for another game with Raheem Sterling to give him a chance. And
Okay, so
maybe he'll play better.
Yeah, okay. I think you both made good points. I'm going to take the opposite side of the argument, not just to be contrarian, just because I honestly believe it. I think it's time to jettison the Raheem Sterling thing. Like, I really believe that. And I'm sure there are people listening saying that's outrageous. Let's think back a year ago. I think we've had our brains broken by the number of injuries we've suffered. And now we just assume players are just going to keep dropping like flies, and they might. But this time last season, we trotted out the same 11 almost every single game nonstop. Every game. Same players. I mean, it was Kai every game. It was Saka every game. It was Trossard every game. It was Rice every game. It was Odegaard every game. It was Jorginho every game, right? Until Partey came back. I think we now are in this weird mold where because we've suffered so many injuries, we're like, we've got to keep just constantly changing it up and keeping people involved just in case. No, you don't. You don't. And I honestly think Sterling can be a better bench option because I don't think he has an hour's worth of good football in him, but maybe he has 20, 25 minutes, 15 minutes worth of come in, use those shaky hips and that little bit of box presence. And so this is the thing, Tim, like, I think one of the reasons you have to start Marino at 9 is whatever you think of Marino at 9, I absolutely believe Leo and Ethan will play better with Marino at 9. I think Odegaard will play better with Marino at 9. I think that the other pieces will function better. Leo was pretty much a non-factor at 9, as we identified, until Marino came on. I mean, Ethan was good start to finish, but obviously once he had that guy to find in the box, that changed the game. I think it's time to jettison the Sterling thing. And even if you think I'm being harsh, this time of the season usually is about zeroing in on your best 11. You know, before you criticize me too about being like, you need the whole squad. I mean, Liverpool are first 11 FC. You know, they basically trot out the same first 11. They know who their players are. Now they have more options, but look what happens when they bring Darwin Nunez on. Look what's happening to him in the press today. Go look at the reaction he's getting. So sometimes you have to lean into what is available. Here would be my hypothesis. If you said to me, Arsenal find a way to reel in Liverpool or Arsenal find a way to go deep in the Champions League, how do you think it happens? I don't think it happens because Sterling is playing a lot of meaningful minutes and finds form. I think it happens because Marino apes the Kai Havertz role effectively enough and scores enough of the odd goal here and there. And that allows Ethan and Leo to play well enough that we keep it going because let's remember, Saka may come back this season and Martinelli almost certainly will. So what do you think of that perspective, which is just like, this isn't the time of year to try to keep everybody invested. And Paul, by the way, I'm not having go at your point because I think it is a fair point. I'm taking the opposite side of it. This is the time of year to zero in on what can work and just turn that dial up to 11 and rip the knob off.
Yeah, I think that's totally fair enough. But I still...
Don't rip your knob off. That's not a recommendation. I know that means something different on your side of the pond. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, yeah, because then you'd have no need for Manscaped products.
Well, it's still going to grow hair down there.
Well, yeah. Anyway, I was going to say not to get too into the weeds of that, but I feel like that doesn't make things better.
Keeps going.
Anyway, what was the question? Yeah, so I don't disagree with you, but like I've just got a feeling it might be like Last Chance Saloon. You know, it's like it's West Ham at home, and you know, like I don't think there's another chance at Forest away if it doesn't. Do you know what I mean? Like I feel like it's just like, okay, you got 60 minutes, mate, type thing, and then we can do that from the bench. But after that, we can't. Like after that, it no longer becomes a viable option. But I'm not massively against your point. But that's kind of why I think you could fudge it and just play Marino in midfield anyway. Just because the way Rice was playing anyway, he was really getting forward against Leicester. He was really joining in. I can see Marino doing that. I think we do need to start Marino, not least because, like, there's a reason, right? We all thought who could potentially play up front, and we all arrived at Marino, right? The club never said that. Arteta did not say that in the.
He said the opposite of that. He kind of threw cold water on it as an idea.
Yeah. But there's a reason we all came to that conclusion. Don't get me wrong. There are, because like who after Marino? Like then you really are in like Gabriel type territory. So like it's pretty slim pickings. But what's the number one thing that none of those forwards replace with Havertz? It's that physical presence, that height, and not just when crosses come in and things like that. But I'm thinking when we play out, or rather when we don't want to play out, when we need to go long, like when David Raya wants to go over the top of the press, having that option just makes us so much more press resistant. And I think you can kind of, like I wrote last week, I did my column about like what can Arsenal do, and I was thinking about like Merino and Trossard, almost like Havertz and Trossard were when Odegaard was out, like swapping over, like, okay, lads, we're going long now. Trossard drops into midfield, Havertz goes up front because we want him competing up there. Ball's on the floor now, other way around. Like, I'm kind of thinking of it almost like a false nine partnership, which you can then change up and just say, okay, actually, balls to false nine, you're number 9 now, Merino, particularly when the game gets stretched. And look, one of the things West Ham will aim to do, particularly with a back 5, what do teams do when they play in low blocks? They want you to cross the ball in. They want to bait you into crossing the ball in. And so having someone there that you can actually cross to makes a lot of difference. And we definitely didn't have that at Leicester last week, and not least because one of the things I say we've discovered, we probably already knew this, Nwaneri can cross the ball. Like, he's got that Saka thing, he can drop it on a sixpence, as we saw for the first goal. So I definitely think Merino needs to start, just a case of whether it's 9 or a little bit further back.
Yeah, I'll bring you back into this, Paul, because I know you wanted to add to it. And obviously, I think this is the crux of the most important discussion in the Arsenal world right now, at least from a tactics on the pitch scenario. I think there's just other sort of domino effects of having Merino at 9. A lot of them you already raised him, but you can go long, which is something we do. I think your press looks a little bit better. The other thing too, I get the idea of like, hey, it's West Ham at home. Let's give Sterling another hour because we really want to see if we can get him firing. Well, first of all, it's February 20th. Maybe it's time to accept that there is no world where we get Sterling firing. But the other problem is Leicester are the worst defense in the league. The worst defense in the league. We basically didn't trouble them at all until Merino came on. Almost literally not at all. The worst defense in the league. It all sounds good when you say it, just, hey, let's give him an hour against West Ham at home and see if he can get on track. You know when it doesn't sound good? When it's 70 minutes and it's 0-0, and now you have 20 minutes to get the goal you spent 70 minutes not getting. So this idea of throwing away hours on tests, that makes sense in September to some extent when you're trying to see what you have in your squad. I think it makes less sense in late February. And that's not to say that starting Sterling is clearly dumb and wrong. It's to say that I think it is becoming a risk we just don't need to take. The last point I'll make on Merino, in a season where players surely are feeling the minutes in their legs, having played all summer and now played, a grueling fixture schedule already, Merino will be relatively fresh and should have a lot more to give. So some last thoughts on this discussion, Paul, and I want to be clear, I think there's every possibility that Arteta will go back to Sterling, Leo, and Ethan, but I'm curious what your final thoughts on this are.
Yeah, I just think, so I want to poo-poo your idea that we start the same 11 continually, because this is a first 11 that we're talking about with Merino up front and Nwaneri on the right, and I guess Trossard's fitness has been okay, but it's not 100% bulletproof. And like Nwaneri's, Arteta's talked about, he's a young guy, growing into his body, that he's hinted that, there's stuff there that they're working through in terms of building up his strength.
Yep.
That you can't just assume that and now we're asking 90 minutes every game, twice a week, going forward. We're asking the same of even Sterling. We're asking the same of Merino, who's been injured and out for a couple of periods now. It's just not, when you talk about Arsenal last year, we were in our bulletproof mode. It was actually the first 11 starting every game, not just an 11. Yep. Liverpool's first 11 fully fit starting every game. There's no 11 we can assemble right now where players are playing in positions they played before. I just don't think you're going to get the same 11 started, no matter who they are. You're not going to get that 11 showing up. They're not able to. They're not played in.
Can I ask you something, though? Just real quick, Paul. Then doesn't that sort of actually make the argument for not starting Sterling in the sense that you keep a winger in reserve on the bench? Because like if you start Sterling, Leo, and Ethan, you are in a situation where there is really no recognized winger on the bench. You're talking about Tierney, but if you start with Marino and Sterling's on the bench, if you have any faith left in Sterling at all, if Ethan's feeling the minutes in his leg a bit, or if Leo's just, you're worried that he's in the red zone, you've got a winger to bring on and they can share the game, which is harder to manufacture if you start all three of them at once.
Yeah. No, I look, he could go with a number of different lineups to start. I just don't think you or we can settle into the first 11 mentality because Arteta can't. He has to keep Sterling on board, I think. Anything can happen in the next few games. And he has to do a little bit of 3D chess in terms of who starts and which subs. And yeah, it's not. I'm not so much arguing that Marino has to start, can't start up top or can't start. I'm just saying he's going to look at the next few games and think, I need all of these guys involved. He may look at charitably at Sterling and say, well, he hasn't had a lot of those games. He's never played with Trossard as a false nine and Nwaneri on the other side. And, Sterling's learning to now maybe there's no more here. Maybe there's no more in the tank for Raheem Sterling, but he may look at it and say, what we really need to do is work out how to play better, move better, have Trossard come out, have Sterling pop into the false nine spot. Not so much it can't work as it didn't work the last time around, because he's got to look at it and say, I'm not going to get to start these guys and play them for 90 minutes every game. I'm going to need Sterling in the mix. I'm going to need Marino as a potential. Well, I need to bed in Marino, and I don't know that I can play Nwaneri for 90 minutes game in, game out. So guess what? Raheem Sterling has to be part of the mix.
Yep. And there's nothing that you just said that is like wrong per se.
Good.
I think, and it's hard to say this because anytime you say something definitive, football will make you look really silly, right? I mean, football is rarely as definitive as we as fans want it to be. I just think that from what I've seen of Sterling this season, he's so far past being at the level that's required that, like, if you said to me, instead of Sterling, we're going to try Calafiori at left wing for 20 minutes or Tierney at left wing, I wouldn't be opposed to it, I guess is what I'm saying, right? And there may be others who look at how Sterling's played and say that's really doing him dirty. He hasn't been nearly that bad. And you may be right. I mean, I may be over-indexing some of the frustration of the games where he has played, but I don't think, let's put it this way, I don't think he's been good enough that you're in the territory where it would be wild to go try something exotic. Not to mention that if Martinelli and Saka are back, I think soon is overstating it, but not too long, and there is an international break in the midst of that period, that we're talking about solutions for a couple of weeks, not the balance of the season. So let's just see how that plays out. I will say that the psychology, this is going to get interesting. I hate to refer to social media, but there's some big Liverpool accounts out there that are feeling the pressure. One that I like, Sean, said, if we do bottle it, it's the worst in the history of the league. You couldn't even get Virgil van Dijk out for an interview to say Arsenal also have some amazing players and Saka had an outstanding season. It would actually be losing to Mikel Merino at 9 and a 17-year-old. And Arne Slot said, we come over here and I see fireworks. I don't know if they do this every game, but I assume that it's because it's Liverpool. No, Arne, they do it every game, mate. I assume every game for Villa is sold out. Yeah, they are. Normally, teams don't have injuries because their players want to play against Liverpool. Villa had like a full-on injury crisis. Did you see the defense they had to put out for this game? Like, this guy is fully leaning into excuse mode. And I have to say, the thing I love about Mikel Arteta, you just don't hear the excuses from him. You hear, we're going to do it. We're going to fight to the end. We're doing our best, even though he wasn't back in the market in January, even though he has no players. I just think this situation is making me appreciate Mikel more. And I know there's some people that are frustrated with him. I can't connect to that. I think to be in a position where people are even expecting us to have a go at this in our situation is pretty remarkable. And if you want a little bit of optimism, if Arsenal and Liverpool repeated their results from last season, and I know that is not how any of this works, and I know we do not have any players, but if we did that, we would win the title 85-84. So this is the time of year last season when Liverpool started to fall away. Now, let's remember also, this was like 3.25 to 0.7 on XG. Like they still battered them well. But the interesting difference between us and them is I think defensively they aren't so solid. I don't think they're going to have a lot of games where they can keep teams out. And the funny thing about it, if you really think about Liverpool this season, I think they're the same team as last season. They attack really well. You can play through their midfield a bit. You can turn them around because their games tend to turn into basketball at times, and you can score on them. The difference is they've stayed fit this season, and they're getting the Salah season for the ages. And that's worked for them. And that's fair, but I don't think Slot has transformed them. I think they're essentially the same Liverpool of last season. So let's see where it goes from here. But I think keeping hope alive is certainly a reasonable outlook. You know what else is reasonable? Using a VPN when you want to watch videos that are geolocked. And the VPN that I would use is NordVPN, and I recommend you do as well because NordVPN is fast, it's easy, it's an app. You put it on your phone, you put it on your tablet, you put it on your PC, you put it on your Mac. Doesn't matter. You just click, I want to browse in England, or I want to browse in Australia, or I want to browse in Japan, or I want to browse in Canada, or I want to browse in Turkmenistan, or I want to browse in Estonia, or I want to browse in Norway, or I want to browse in Thailand, or I want to browse in New Zealand, or I want to browse in Bolivia. There are probably other places you might want to browse, but those are places you could browse, presumably. I have to admit, I have not tried browsing in Bolivia, but you could. Or if you're Mike Tyson, you could just slip into Bolivia. That's a quote you should look up. It's a pretty funny one. Point is, it's fast. It's easy. You can watch the geolocked videos. You can watch the match review of the day video that sometimes is fun to watch when we've won and our rivals have lost. You can watch the football on your subscription when you're out of the country. You can watch streaming shows before they come out where you are. And it has threat protection, so you don't get threats to your device when you're on streams that you shouldn't be. Tisk, tisk. Luckily, NordVPN has a huge discount for you. Get an exclusive NordVPN deal by going to nordvpn.com/ArsenalVision to get a huge discount off your NordVPN plan, plus 4 additional months on top. It's completely risk-free with Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee. It's nordvpn.com/ArsenalVision. That's nordvpn.com/ArsenalVision. Do it now. And also, Indeed is the hiring partner to attract, interview, and hire all in one place. Indeed is fast. It is one site. Instead of going to multiple job sites, posting your jobs there, and then searching those jobs, and then looking at the replies, and then hoping you're going to need 2 full-time jobs just to look at all the job sites, or you could just let Indeed do it once. They're one of the top hiring partners. They get you more quality candidates with Instant Match. You are more likely to get the candidates that fit your specific needs. So instead of seeing candidates that are all over the map, I mean, imagine you go on another job site, you post a job, you get people like me applying to it. You use Indeed to get people that match your requirements more. What am I going to say? I'm short. How's that going to fit your job requirement? Unless your job requirement is can walk under low surfaces. Then I'd fit your job requirement. But assuming that's not the job, if the job is not to walk into rooms with small doors, then you're going to want someone whose qualities fit your job requirement. Look, the moral of the story is you should use Indeed. Saves you time. It gets you better candidates. It is the hiring partner that more companies trust. So get a $50 sponsor job credit. Sponsor your job now, that thing on Indeed.com/vision. That's Indeed.com/vision. Indeed.com/vision. If you need to hire, you need Indeed. Tim, is that enough of that?
Indeed.
As professional as anything else I've done today, that's for sure. Okay, nailed it. Tim, Champions League. Let's touch on this quickly. I think Real Madrid might be good, unfortunately. Kylian Mbappe's back. Vinny's pretty good. They got a player. They don't even have to play Camavinga or Tchouaméni. We should go for one of those players, by the way. Hi there, sweetie. As your daughter. Well, anyone who's listening on audio has to be like, what on earth? What is going on with Elliot right now?
I'm in my daughter's room, to be fair, so this is her territory.
It is her territory, but that is who I was saying that to. You could see the parent mode in me came out just automatically. Talk to me a little bit about how much you enjoy seeing Manchester City get humiliated and the state of play in the Champions League.
Yeah, we'll put it this way. When the Villa-Liverpool game finished, I put that on. I knew what the score was. I didn't put it on to see a nice close game or a comeback. And kind of unfortunately, I got like 10 minutes of Harlem Globetrotters stuff where, Vinny Jr. is spinning the ball on his finger and Mbappe is, going full court. And then kind of Real Madrid took all their players off and stopped trying for the last 15 minutes. But yeah, I mean, it's just further confirmation, isn't it? This is City now. Like, I think everyone's given up talking about what Guardiola's going to do to fix this. Like I haven't
Can he
seen that.
just fix it this coming weekend?
Well, yeah. I mean, I give them no hope of getting anything against Liverpool, I have to say. And,
they can't defend. Yeah.
No, they're just wide open. And
Mhm.
I saw loads of, quite negative body language, kind of throwing arms up in the air, turning back on play and all of that. Like, I mean, for me, like I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, with some degree of excitement, like, can they fix this next season? Like, what are because it seems so fundamentally broken and all their players just seem to have aged at the same time. I'm kind of like, does a transfer window fix this? Because they just had one. And
well, they did get some good players. They got a midfielder. They got an attacker. I mean, Kusanov does not convince me. That much I will say.
No,
does
and
not convince me.
Like, is it Marmoush?
Marmoush, yeah, he did have a hat trick the other day.
He looks decent. Like, don't get me wrong, he looks decent, but that doesn't strike me as where their issues are. Like, they get.
I think Nico Gonzalez is probably a pretty good midfielder. You can't replace Rodri though. I don't know if Savinho's it. Like, they still have Erling Haaland, Foden. They let's put it this way: they could actually be fine.
They could, but I don't know. It just seems so fundamental. Like, I think it's gone beyond a bit. Like, oh, they're missing Rodri. Don't get me wrong. I think that's the biggest factor. But I'm looking at them and I'm not thinking, oh, Rodri comes back, all of this is just completely and utterly fixed. Like, it feels like something's a bit more fundamentally broken. And look, maybe it's just the players have kind of written the season off or something, or they've just gone, it's not going to happen this year, is it? And maybe they come back next year with a fresh mindset. But they've got the Club World Cup as well in like June and July. They've basically got no summer off.
Yeah, that's good. I mean, that's a good point. You know what? I take it back. They're done. They're done out here in these streets. They're toast. Tim, it's unfortunate because they play Liverpool next and they're going to be in a really low moment. But maybe there's a little bit of pride at stake. Yeah. Given what they just went through, I will say that hat trick from Kylian Mbappe is out of this world. The first goal, I don't know where Ederson's going necessarily, but the execution of it is still incredible.
And they do seem to, because I know there was some kind of trepidation about, how do you get Vinny Jr. and Mbappe into the same team, and it did seem like relatively speaking that took some time. Like, Mbappe was still scoring plenty of goals while they worked it out, but I think there is something about actually you put really high level attacking players together, it will work. It's a bit like with us. Like, I don't kind of really think Ozil and Sanchez were a good partnership, but also they really were, if that makes sense. Like, I don't think...
It doesn't make any sense, Tim.
What I mean is, I don't think they were more than the sum of their parts. I don't think the partnership transformed it to another level. Like, and I think there were issues. Like, Ozil's best ever form in an Arsenal shirt was when Sanchez was not in the team. And I think there was something about that. But at the same time, there were two really good footballers. Yeah, and when you play two really good attackers, it will probably be fine, kind of thing.
Yeah, stacking talent tends to work. Like, the only example, I know the Galacticos kind of underperformed once upon a time, and like PSG were a failure, I guess. But like, PSG are a failure because they didn't win the Champions League, and like Champions League really hard to win. Weird things happen. They had Real Madrid do their voodoo to them once. I think did Barcelona do it to them once too.
They got to a final once. But
they dominated France. Like, it's just one of those things, right? When you're a project of that scale, the only thing that matters is the Champions League, and the Champions League is just really hard to win.
And also, you need to not just spend money on attackers. You need to buy midfielders and defenders as well. And that's what like the Galacticos and what PSG didn't really do. Like, you can't just be the best team in the world because you've got the three best attackers, but
you also can't run a school with nothing but substitute teachers, and like the managers very rarely seem to have the authority there. So look, I think stacking talent tends to work. Real Madrid has a lot of it. They now go into a situation where there's a decent chance, by the way, we face them in the round of 16 if we get through in the quarterfinal. If we get through the round of 16, it would be them or we'd be on the Bayern side. The draw will be tomorrow, and at the start of the Power Rankings episode with Clive tomorrow, we'll touch on our draw, of course. I have to say, though, Paul, cast your mind back to COVID, if you will. I know not a pleasant time. COVID football project restart. And the summer, Arsenal had some work to do. And I was pretty confident that one of the things Arsenal could do to be not just title challengers, but Galacticos themselves. One of the things that we could do, one of the players, the talent we needed to retain, and I went fairly big on it, was Dani Ceballos. And I was roundly ridiculed for the fact that I had faith in Dani Ceballos, that I believed Dani Ceballos was a critical piece of a project that could go to the top of the game. Well, they're not laughing. No, they're still laughing. But how do you feel watching Dani Ceballos play and play well for a rampant Real Madrid? It is still one of those bizarro world moments for me.
It is weird. Look, we knew he was a good player, but was he a Premier League player? I don't know.
Turns out, no, he's a Champions League player.
Yeah. And the other thing one could ridicule is the fact that I bought the Dani Ceballos shirt, which you remind me of every now and then.
Yep.
It's a weird one, and it makes you project a picture of how a player might do in a particular situation, and he's like a cockroach in that he just seems to survive every cull at Real Madrid. He's the guy still standing, apart from their Galacticos. He's the guy who survives, not so good that they could sell him to everybody, but good enough that they can use him in a pinch, in significant games and minutes. And yeah, he was always really, really good at football. And the other problem is lone players. That's always an interesting dynamic.
Yeah,
but very good player, not super physical, obviously. Doesn't cover the ground. But if you dominate a game, if it's super technical and you can cast your spells, he's a super technical player.
Yeah, and I think it's a reminder that some players are not meant to be the load-bearing wall in a team, but they can be a very important part of the furniture, so to speak. And Dani Ceballos was playing in a pretty broken team that was not yet built to do what it needed to do. I mean, could Dani Ceballos play as a 6 in our system with all these pieces around him? I think he could. He could maybe even do some other roles in this team. Look, I don't think he's necessarily a fit for the type of football Arteta wants to play either. And I'm not saying he's an elite player. I'm just saying he's an example of why this binary of he's the GOAT or he's shit about how we discuss players is so worthless, because players can play a role in a good team that adds something to that team. I mean, there are players, I think about, who might be a good example. This is Jordan Henderson. I'm not sure how good Jordan Henderson was. Like, do I think Jordan Henderson was one of the most talented players in the Premier League? I don't think he was. But for Klopp, he was a really important piece who did a lot of the dirty work, right? Did a lot of the things that team needed. Gilberto Silva, this is probably doing him dirty, but again, a player that maybe wasn't evaluated highly enough for his talent, but did such an important role for one of the best teams in the history of the Premier League. And I'm sure we can all think of players like this. But it's a reminder not to have these weird binaries about players.
Yes, Elliot.
Yeah. And Paul, I think that's a good lesson to you. So, okay. Well, let's stay on the Champions League for a minute, because Tim, it looks like, first of all, PSG, we played that PSG team. They were not impressive. They just did my 10-0, granted on aggregate, to Brest. And I'm not going to make any silly, obvious comment about that because I'm a mature grown-up.
About Brest being out of the cup.
That's a better, yeah. That one actually is fine. I can go with that. But yes, so so they look all of a sudden pretty savage, and I mean, there's a 50-50 shot Liverpool get them, or Barcelona get them. In which case, then I think it's Bruges for Liverpool. But we have a 50-50 shot of PSG and Feyenoord, and if we get, PSV or Feyenoord. PSV knocking out a very bad Juventus, and Feyenoord on the brink of potentially appointing Robin van Persie to be their manager, who by all accounts did not get on very well with Mikel Arteta. That would be a bit spicy. Now, if you're in the Feyenoord bracket, you're in the Bayern side of the bracket. So I think that's a much better Feyenoord under Robin van Persie with Bayern as the possible next matchup, unless it's Leverkusen or Atleti. The other side of the bracket is a better PSV in my view, and potentially Real Madrid or Atleti or Bayer Leverkusen. So I want the Feyenoord Bayern side of that bracket pretty clearly. Obviously, we'd have to get past Feyenoord to get the next leg. But what's your take on that and the potential face-off between Robin van Persie and Mikel Arteta.
Yeah, I'd prefer that side. Also, selfishly, I've been to Eindhoven 5 times and never been to Rotterdam. We've never drawn Feyenoord in my lifetime, so I'd prefer to go there. Of the two, both very similar journeys, similar distances, but
How is the away day in the Netherlands in general? It can be pretty spicy, can it?
It's fine. It's pretty fine.
Yeah. Better than like Italy or Spain.
Yeah.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
I think I probably would prefer that side. And Bayern, from what I follow a few people who follow the Bundesliga very closely, are very Bayern look tired. They look like they're going to win the league. I think because they're a bit ahead of Leverkusen now, but apparently they don't look as good as they did a couple of months ago. Maybe the schedule catching up to them a little bit as well. Although, Germany doesn't really have much of a schedule, does it? Like the cowards, they don't have a third domestic cup, and they have 34 league games, like child's play.
Not to mention, by the way, they qualified by the skin of their teeth. I mean, a late winner
against Celtic. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, Celtic. Yeah,
and look, it would be a good measuring stick for us, to play Bayern again at the same stage as that we did last year. Perhaps a little less healthy, but maybe they're not as kind of good. And also, I also think Tuchel is a good champion. I think Tuchel's a good cup manager.
Yeah.
I don't think he's a manager that wins you the league, but I think he's a manager that wins you cups. He's in that Benitez type fold. So
versus Company this season.
Yeah, exactly. So they don't have that. So I'd fancy another go at Bayern. Not saying we'd definitely win, but I'd fancy another go at it. And it'd be a good measuring stick, and I think a good motivation for the players to have exactly the same game at exactly the same time. With them, Feyenoord or PSV. PSV are better. They're better they're higher in the league by good 12 points, and they're in better form as well. But either way, what's going to happen there is you're going to have a noisy, hostile away game. Both PSV and Feyenoord, they'll make a racket at home. Massive game. It
would be a massive game for them, Tim, and I know we have to let you go, so that's Tim for now. We're going to talk Arsenal finances in a moment, but yeah, for PSV, their first win in a knockout stage since they knocked us out in 2007. Alex had her from a corner late. I remember it well, but it's going to be interesting. I mean, you're getting to that point. PSG's there, Bayern's there, we're there, Liverpool there, Barcelona there, Atleti's there, Bayer Leverkusen's there, Real Madrid is there. It's, they did this table phase and it mixed things up. It spiced things up. But it's a lot of the same names that are going to be there in that last 16, I think, and probably in the quarterfinal as well. But for now, the one thing I will say, once you get to the quarterfinal, I think it's fair to draw Bayern or Real Madrid. I mean, it's the Champions League. Do you hope you get a lucky draw in the quarterfinal? I mean, okay, you can hope for that, but the quarterfinal, semifinal, final, you're going to start seeing big teams. I think PSV and Feyenoord being our two options for the round of 16 is perfectly fair. And, unlike the years of when we were drawing Bayern in the round of 16 and Barca in the round of 16 every season, even with injuries, I think those are ties we can get through and probably should get through. So, Paul, do you agree that whether it's Feyenoord or PSV, and I will be pushing pretty hard for Feyenoord also because it puts some more favorable side of the draw away from Real Madrid, that those are ties that even with our injuries, I think it's fair to have pretty big expectations to get through it?
Big expectations? No. I just think Europe is different. The Champions League is different. You can be a favorite, but not by too much. We haven't been here a lot for a while, and these players haven't. So I think it doesn't matter it matters who you play, but just because we're playing Feyenoord or PSV, I don't think we're big favorites. I think it's good. I think
I got to stop because I know people will be shouting this. Mathematically speaking, betting market speaking, we will be massive favorites regardless of who's fit.
Yeah, well, the people who bet on these things are idiots. I mean, just cast your mind back to these phases in Europa League when we were massive favorites. It's going to going to be close.
Well, I mean, you can cast your mind back to Porto last season when we were massive favorites and we needed penalties to get past them. I will say we faced PSV in the group phase last season. We beat them 4-0 at home in a battering. Then they were our last group phase game when we were away to them, and we drew it 1-1. But if I remember correctly, it was a dead rubber at that point. So
wasn't that Ruud van Nistelrooy was the manager? And
yeah,
stuff?
yeah. But so it was 4-0 away when it mattered and 1-1 when it didn't. So hard to say. But look, the Porto tie backs up your point, Paul, which is it doesn't matter how big a favorite you are. Knockout rounds of Champions League football are tough. And I mean, look, Bayern versus Celtic, I would have thought 10-0, kind of like what PSG just did. And they needed a winner at the death. PSV got past Juventus. I mean, there were certainly some shock results. So I take your point.
Yeah, look, we'll of course be favourites against Feyenoord, but doesn't mean it won't be tricky for us. So I just think we're at a stage where the games against lesser teams, we're going to find them challenging. The games against bigger teams, I mean, I don't fancy us against Real Madrid. I'll be honest, Elliot. But Bayern, we played them last year. So that kind of hoodoo, now we lost, but that hoodoo of going to the great Bayern Munich, even if they're not great right now, there's a psychological piece where we're halfway there. We'll get there a lot quicker than the hoodoo we had against Man City, but by playing them a number of times, they became mortal rather than unbeatable. And I think we saw enough of Bayern last year to know we should have done much better if we can put out a strong team against them. I certainly fancy that. So the other side of the coin is I'm optimistic we can get past Bayern if we can get past, say, Feyenoord.
Yeah, look, there's every shot that we're going to be playing Feyenoord or PSV with Mikel Merino as our number 9, a 17-year-old on the right. He'll be 18 by that point maybe, but and Leo Trossard on the left, and
Yep.
That's no one's idea of what an attack should look like in the Champions League, and it's not to say that we can't get through, but this is going to be one of those really tough seasons, and I said this on the Monday pod, I think, which is intellectually, I understand why we have to have patience with what we're going to see between now and May. But when you're playing PSV or you're playing Feyenoord and it's a round of 16 in the Champions League and we're not battering them, your emotions are going to be saying, this sucks, what's going on with us? While your eyes are telling you you're watching Mikel Merino play 9 and a teenager play on the right.
I just don't think it'd be nuts to think we're going to score goals at will, even if we're dominating possession. I mean, we could just be hitting kind of dry spots where the goals don't come easily. It's not too hard to imagine that right now.
We were hitting those dry spots when we had our starters. So, that's a fair point. The other exciting side of that coin, though, is what a chance for Ethan Nwaneri to announce himself. You know what I mean? I hope instead of being nervous and the caveats and, we have a 17-year-old on the right, what if we take it the other way, which is we are introducing a superstar to the world. I would rather look at it that way. And I realize that's putting a lot on his shoulders, but I think he can handle it. I think the talent is there.
He can, though. Obviously the one quick point on that is they now know where the talent in our attacking line is, and Ethan hasn't faced 3 left backs encircling him. I mean, he's well up for it, but it'll be all about keeping Nwaneri quiet because we're not afraid of the other options. So,
yep.
It's going to be interesting.
Let's put it this way: there are teenagers in some of the best teams in the world playing at the top level, and that's not to say every teenager can do that, but it certainly shows that if the talent is enough, they can. I mean, Barcelona have 2 teenagers in their starting 11 that are, one of the best attackers, one of the best defenders in the world. And they are probably favorites. Well, they're not favorites in the betting markets, but one of the big favorites for the Champions League. So, Paul, final topic is the finances. I don't want to go too deep on this because neither of us are experts at reading a balance sheet. There are tons of social media accounts breaking this down. Swiss Rambo will do his brilliant stuff on it. I'll try to get a finance expert on to dig into the accounts a little bit more. And what I might do, I might just wait until either the season's over, maybe the interlull, but do it at a time when because look, when we've just won a game or we've got a big Champions League tie coming up digging into the finances is not particularly exciting, but it is important. So maybe we'll do that during the interlull. That's a good idea that I just had. So kudos to me. Maybe we'll do that. But is there anything that jumped out at you specifically from the Arsenal finances that you think is relevant?
I haven't read through them. Elliot, why don't you tell me?
Well, I think there's a few things. First of all, the revenue is up. It is way up, and it's going to continue to go up. Remember, this is for the prior season, so this is, it doesn't include what we're doing this season. But with Champions League back, that helps a lot. I think the thing that jumps out to me is just the way we've closed the gap to Manchester United. Once upon a time, they had like £300 million or more revenue gap to Arsenal, and now I think it's down to like £30 million. It shows you a few years of being pretty good and a few years of being pretty bad can make a big, big difference in your financial circumstances in football, even for giants like Manchester United. We did make a loss, and it just is a reminder that football at the top level tends to be a loss-making activity. And so we are funded by owner capital injections. KSE did put money in. I think Scott pointed this out on social media, and it is a relevant point, which is these sort of owner loans, well, for a couple of things, with Manchester City sort of winning their court case against APT, the Associated Party Transactions. Once again, these owner loans are in the spotlight, and owner loans at favorable rates right now are totally allowed. KSE can loan Arsenal money at 0% interest, and that's not going to count against the cost controls, whether that's the Premier League cost controls or the PSR or the UEFA ones, at least not right now, as far as I can tell. But we're not in a 0% interest rate world anymore. Interest rates have gone up, which means if money is going to be borrowed, and that borrowing is going to be done by the owners to give to the club, then there's a cost to it. If the borrowing from the owner to the club is going to be done at a going rate interest rate, there's a big cost to it. I don't know enough to know whether that has to happen or will happen, or if the money will just be given for free, but I think that's something to keep an eye on. The fact of the matter is we're well within PSR. We have tons of PSR and UEFA, whatever it is, SC cost control, with whatever it is, SCCR, whatever. We're well within it. We have plenty of headroom. We're going to have even more next year with another year of Champions League under our belt, because it is a 3-year rolling total. Our wage bill went up massively. Now, what's interesting is we've got some very big wages that'll come off the books, I assume, based on players that I think will go out. Like I think Thomas Partey will probably go, and he's a big, big earner. But we have to probably renegotiate Gabriel. We might want to have a look at Bukayo Saka again. There's some players in there. Ethan Nwaneri might be a player we want to give a little extra money to. Maybe even Miles Lewis-Skelly. There's players that need to get a bump. So I think there are players that will go out. But I think Saliba maybe might need another one. But the moral of the story is, so I don't think wages will come down. All in all, the way I look at it is we have plenty of room to spend big in the summer from a PSR and UEFA standpoint, but we are a loss-making enterprise. And so the ability to spend big will be based on whether KSE wants to inject the capital for player trading. And most of the capital injected by KSE in these financial reports was for the acquisition of players. In fact, in the published reports that Arsenal put out, they say that money was given from KSE to Arsenal for the purpose of buying players, essentially. Now, Arsenal got better at selling players. There were more sales last summer, and I think there will be more sales this summer, although not generating as much money because we just don't have as many saleable assets. So I guess, Paul, where I'm going with this is it seems kind of simple to me, which is we have tons of revenue. We're very safe within the cost controls that have been set up by the organizing bodies of the Premier League and UEFA. But if we want to buy, the way we're going to be able to buy is KSE putting the money in to buy. It's not going to come from cash flows and cash reserves and profits. Those don't exist. So it's either going to come from sales that we then put into purchases or money that comes from KSE. So I guess what I'm asking you is, do you presume that KSE will continue to try to chase success with money that they put into the club?
Well, bloody hell, look at you. That was very impressive, Elliot.
It was a lot of waffle, let's be honest.
No, this is very good. That's a tour de force on our finances.
Fair enough.
Look, Elliot, you have to give me some props. I was the guy who defended our billionaires as being...
You have the courage to defend billionaires. It's just something about you that you have that courage of character, and we appreciate it.
Yeah, back in the day when our billionaires were not the most popular billionaires on the planet, and we're going through tough times. I was of the opinion that they were not the worst billionaires on the planet. And they have for quite some time been willing to back the club, back the manager, go back to £73 million Pepe, Lacazette, and Aubameyang in the same season. Like, they have spent money on players along the way. And then when our ownership model was and structure was sorted out and they got rid of Usmanov and they had 100% of the club, they have looked to invest along the way. And so, I still, we should all be skeptical of the largesse of billionaire owners, but as billionaire owners go, they do seem to be backing the club, backing the manager to push on to do big things for whatever the reasons might be. I'm sure they love football and they love seeing the Arsenal victorious. But they have their own financial reasons for wanting Arsenal to be one of the biggest clubs, one of the jewels in the European football pantheon. I don't know if you can be in a pantheon if you're not a god, and we're not a god.
I also don't know if there can be a jewel in a pantheon. I guess you could throw anything in a pantheon.
Yeah, you can. Well, yeah. I'm not going to argue. That's not the hill I'm going to die on, Elliot.
Okay.
They clearly want us to be in the mix of one of the biggest clubs in Europe for whatever the reasons are that you could be skeptical of. In the short to medium term, I don't expect them to stop backing the club, stop investing. If it was all about profit and loss, simply based on a kind of a year by year, or even looking at it over 2 or 3 years, if it was only about the profitability of the club, they wouldn't have done what they've done over the last few years. There's been a little hint over the last window or so that, we got to sell before we buy to some degree, but they still really haven't stuck to that. We spend a lot of money early in the summer typically to get the players we want, and then we look to sell players. And it's like, if you were just dropped into this Arsenal now, you would say, well, it's a very enlightened ownership. They're investing, and if they can sell players and make some money, great. And if they can't, they're going to keep investing. That has been the way for the last few years. Again, I don't think it's Mother Teresa Inc., but from a footballing standpoint, I expect them to keep investing, keep pushing. They want us to be one of the top clubs in Europe for their reasons, and they probably don't mind seeing Arsenal winning stuff. I'm sure Josh still has some blood flowing in his veins, unlike Stan, and actually enjoys winning stuff. He's a young enough man to have it all. He's got the money, the power, the fame. He's stepping into the control, and he probably does enjoy winning, though probably not at any cost. So, yeah, I think we're going to keep pushing forward, even if, for a number of seasons now, I'm like, this feels very profligate of us, the choices we made, the things we did, when you see the outgoings versus the incomings. But more power to them. I'm sure there's no tab to be paid at any stage by anybody in the future that might impact on us. But let's not worry about that now.
Yeah, we'll see. Just for people who want the actual numbers, our revenue went from £466.7 million to £616.6 million. Obviously, a huge jump.
That's a lot more.
Yeah, it's a big jump, which is great. The commercial strategy increased revenue. I mean, there was revenue growth from just about everything: commercial partnerships, merchandise. Obviously, ticket sales, TV revenues, Champions League, all of that. The overall loss for the year was £17.7 million, but that's a big narrowing of the loss, down from £52.1 million. There was some player trading as well, which helped. The profit on the sale of players was £52.4 million versus just £12 million. So we only sold £12 million worth of players 2 summers ago, which is crazy. £52.4 million in player sales is obviously an improvement. There were finance charges, and I think that's relevant. That's for borrowing. Net finance charges increased to $18.4 million from $6.2 million. This increase reflects a combination of higher borrowings and higher market rate interests. And that is the key. If we're going to borrow more from Papa Stan, and if they are not allowed to do it at a sweetheart rate because of cost controls, then they have to do it at market rate. And the market rate for borrowing money, I mean, this is boring stuff, but it's real simple, right? If I loan you money and it has a 0% interest rate, then there's no cost for that money. If it has a 10% interest rate, there's an enormous cost. Now, it's not 10%, but it just makes the point, right? So there was a big increase in finance charges, which I think is interesting. And then there is this one little note that they put in the article. Funding is provided mainly by the ultimate parent company, KSE UK Inc., which is wholly owned by the ultimate controlling party, Mr. E.S. Kroenke. During the year, KSE UK provided funds both to underpin the club's transfer activities and for working capital purposes as required. And that is really the crux of it. To underpin transfer activities, KSE is putting money in the club. As long as we're making a loss, the only way we're going to get money for the transfers we need is from selling players and then reinvesting that money, or from KSE putting it in. As long as KSE is willing to put it in, again, no problem with cost controls, PSR or UEFA. The issue is whether the ownership will continue to fund the activities. And so if you think we're going to go super big this summer, we can. We have the PSR room to do it. But where's the money going to come from? It's going to have to come from the club backing the project, backing the competitiveness. And I think it's going to be kind of interesting in a way. And by the way, my outlook is I think they will, just so we're clear. But it's going to be a very interesting summer because I think this summer is a line in the sand. It's clear what we need. I think everybody sort of gets it at this point, if there was any ambiguity before. And it's clear that it's going to take some big spending to do it. And it's clear that we have the room under PSR to do it. So if we don't do it, or if there's a hesitance, or if we do it cheaply, then I think that will be an indicator that we are moving back to more of a self-sustainable approach, and we're going to be able to spend what we make, and that's more of the future. If we do go big to get the positions we need, then I think that's an indication that we are continuing to be funded in a way that reflects a desire to go compete for things. I'm not going to put my thumb on the scale and say which way I think that'll go. I just think we're going to learn a lot this summer. I think it's going to be a telling summer in that respect. And I think it's an important summer in a way too, because I think to Tim's point, I think City have a bit of a rebuild ongoing, and I don't think they just become great again next season. There's every chance they'll be good, but will they be elite again? I'm not sure. And Liverpool, whatever they decide to do, Van Dijk eventually is not going to be Van Dijk, and Salah eventually is not going to be Salah, and Trent Alexander-Arnold might be going to Madrid, and there's some work that has to be done there. And they might be in a bit of a rebuild. And I don't see another club ready to just take the mantle. So it's us. How will we behave? It'll be interesting to see. Leave it there, Paul?
Yep.
All right. Thanks very much.
You're welcome.
No, you're welcome. Power rankings tomorrow. Instant reaction on Saturday. Director of Football Pod's ongoing. There's a lot here. We'd love to have you aboard for that, but we're glad you're here for this, and we are looking forward to a big, big victory on Saturday that puts the shits up Liverpool. That's the goal. Keep the pressure on them and see if they can historically bottle the title. Would be insanely fun for all of us. We love you, and we will talk to you after Arsenal 10 West Ham 0.